All right. So we're going to do testing a little things. We're going to see now that we see the full view, we can work some things out. Oh, I can get comfortable and I'm still in.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to the Change for Good podcast. I'm Michael James, your gracious host. What I do is I interview very special people who are both gifted, have some value to the community, and also are on their entrepreneurial experience as well. I have with me today Dr. Lon here, and he is a functional medicine doctor. And I'm actually going to have him interview himself or introduce himself instead of me going through and remember what I know about him.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this. Dr. Lon, starting my practice functional medicine called RootMD here in Indialantic. So really, really excited to be a part of Brevard County, but especially Beachside. We're right across the bridge though, so easy access on South Riverside Drive. And I spent the last 5 years working for a big corporate conglomerate and got just completely sick of it and completely sick of working in the insurance world. So I was like, I have to go out on my own. I have to do this my own way. And that allowed me to really be able to think about how to take care of patients from the best perspective, which is patient outcomes, right? And so I really have set up this practice to be geared directly towards that, really for patient outcomes and giving them the best care possible. So in order to do that, I had to step outside of the insurance game, had to really go out on my own instead of like joining another practice or anything. So learning as it goes on the business side of things, but really excited.
Yeah, well, everybody starts from somewhere.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get right into it, guys. We want you to get a lot of information out of this. I'm going to just ask him some questions. And if you didn't hear, he's here in Indialantic, and he's here to service all of Brevard. He's a functional medicine doctor. The name of his practice is RootMD, where he focuses on health plus care, not just health care. And as he said, and that's something very fascinating. It's something that I believe in. And I hope you guys get a lot of information out of it. So I'm just going to start it out. What is your best definition of functional medicine?
Functional medicine is root cause analysis medicine. So traditional medicine says your blood sugar is high, you have diabetes. That's your diagnosis. Let's give you something that lowers your blood sugar. Functional medicine says your blood sugar is high. Why is your blood sugar high? There could be any number of reasons why that blood sugar is high. And if we actually attack the high blood sugar at the cause, then you get the blood sugar to come down on its own, potentially without pharmaceutical treatments. And most of the time, that one thing of high blood sugar or high blood pressure or whatever it is really a symptom of deeper issues. And so then by treating the underlying cause there, you're actually improving somebody's overall health. You're going to see people with high blood sugar tend to have like fatty liver. That increases your risk of many other things like hepatocellular carcinoma, cancer of the liver. So by lowering that person's blood sugar, you're likely going to get rid of the fat that's in their liver. You're going to improve their metabolism. You're going to lower their risk of other cancers that weren't even on the radar of the traditional medicine doctor at the time, at least.
All right. So you're pretty much getting to the root of the problem instead of putting the Band-Aid
exactly.
on, right?
That's why it's RootMD, and it's a complete paradigm shift in the way that you treat patients, because the question you're always asking is why? Why is that happening? And I remember the first time I had a teacher, U.S. history teacher, asked me why, and I gave him the answer. Then he asked me why, and he gave him, and kind of like kept going. And I was like, he was my soccer coach also, and I was like, dude, I don't know. But trying to get as far down on that why as possible. It's also referred to as like upstream, because there's many downstream effects, but there may be one upstream cause. And again, you get this trickle down effect of improving somebody's health in so many different areas by focusing on what is the actual problem here.
Oh, all right. So what would you say, and I know this is a tough question to answer, is your ideal client?
My ideal client is somebody who has been told by the traditional medical system there's nothing wrong with you, or it's all in your head. Somebody who is sick of it, they have to wait 2 weeks, or they get a UTI and they're like, oh, I gotta go in and see my doctor. Oh, they're booked out for a month. So can you wait that long? It's like, what? I have a UTI.
Yes.
So that's the way we're set up here at RootMD. Is our practice is going to be held very, very small compared to a traditional like insurance-based practice.
Yeah.
When I was in the insurance system, I had 3,000 patients.
Yeah.
So we're going to be somewhere like below, so that we actually have the time to work patients in the same day if they really need to be seen the same day. So that is like one of the major benefits of doing the subscription side of the medicine, right? Of the reimbursement is you subscribe to this clinic so that we can keep our costs down by not employing a bunch of people that send bills to insurance and then receive payments back from insurance. We just go directly through the patients, right?
Oh.
So by doing that, you actually get rid of a lot of expenses in the medical practice. And then you can have a smaller patient panel, and then you can actually see your own patients.
Oh.
One of the things that really, really bugged me at my previous job was we set up minute clinics, right? There's ER, there's urgent care, there's primary care, and they were creating this like minute clinic that's like, oh, it's part of primary care, it's overseen by primary care doctors, but it's people that can't get in to see their actual primary care doctor. Yeah. And when they were setting this up, I raised my hand in one of the meetings and I was like, why don't we just figure out a way that we can actually see our own patients? And everybody was quiet. And the guy was like, well, yeah, I mean, if you want to, okay. So I just have to step away from this and just have to go out and do it all on my own so I can do it my way. But patients benefit not only from that functional medicine expertise, but also I get to see my doctor. I get to see them when I need to, as opposed to the standard medical system is like, yeah, we can see you in a month. Or, some doctors, it's 3 months. Like, it just depends on how long they've been at that practice.
Yes.
So problems in the healthcare industry with health plus care.
There you are. So with that being said, the people who are looking to have you as your primary care physician, these are people like myself. I've already told him that I'm a lock as a new patient. He just opened and I'm already on board. We just did this really awesome body composition scan. Staiku, right? That's what it is?
Yep.
Tell me about the Staiku.
Yeah, so the Staiku is basically a set of cameras hooked up to a computer, and you stand on a big thing that looks like a giant Roomba robot, right? I
will put it in this video somewhere where you can actually see it too.
Yeah, you've got your report. It already got emailed to you. Yeah. And the cameras just watch you as the Roomba spins you in a circle. And so you have to be wearing tight-fitting clothing. And what it's doing is the cameras are checking circumferences around different parts of your body. Your neck, your chest, your abdomen, your thighs, your calf, your forearms, and your bicep upper arm area. And they basically, the company compared these circumferences, not diameters, to bone density scans and DEXA scans, which is kind of the gold standard of body composition. I guess I shouldn't say gold standard, but is the standard in clinical practice, because the gold standard is really like a 4-compartment, like underwater, you're holding your breath kind of a thing. So they compared it to DEXA scans, and they basically just created an algorithm and figured out like, how can we get the best prediction from all these circumferences? So no radiation, it takes 30 seconds. And also because it's being precise. So if you step back on 5 minutes later and do it again and again and again, it'll give you almost the exact same reading every single time. Whereas with a DEXA scan, like we were talking about earlier, you get this x-ray and it's very dependent on the person that's doing the measurements in the x-ray. So the same person could look at the exact same DEXA scan twice in a row and get really different measurements. So that's the nice thing about this is It's not as accurate as a DEXA in the right hands of a DEXA person, but we're going to be able to follow people and their body composition changes over time so much better because we take that person out of it and use a computer. Basically.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, and with the Staiku, right? Staiku. I will put that in this video as well. So with that, so me as a health and wellness and fitness instructor, when I guide people to a health journey, right, I start with awareness is what I say. It's like, know yourself. And the Staiku gives you the numbers to be aware of, because it was telling me what my calorie deficit was. It was telling me like what my BMI, how long, what was my target weight goal, and it was sustainable. It wasn't something crazy.
Right.
It like put me out into August.
Right.
Yeah. So that's healthy.
Right.
It's not like some crash diet where you're like, I'm going to consume 1,000 calories and eat chicken and broccoli only.
Right.
Speaking of chicken and broccoli, nutrition is one of the most important things of optimal health.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference on whether it be plant-based, vegan, whole food, high protein? What was your even though health is not one size fits all, by the way, guys, what would be your most ideal?
I think the most ideal eating situation is plant-based and specifically focusing on the diversity of plant intake because that is so important for your, but the other side of that is ensuring adequate protein intake. So if you're not getting enough protein intake, then you can start breaking muscle down, right, to use as energy. But it's a crummy energy source. And we're now finding that not enough muscle mass, sarcopenia, is actually worse for your health than too much fat mass. So muscle is not just important, metabolically because it burns more energy than fat does, but hormonally, fat is much more hormonally active, right? And there's many other things, but also just the function of the individual. If you're 70 years old and you don't have enough muscle mass, your risk of falling and breaking your hip is exponentially higher. And I've had this with patients. I've had patients, 68-year-old woman who has osteoporosis on her bone density scan, but she rides horses. She's super fit and super active. And I said, the reason that we do a bone density scan is to prevent breaking a bone, but you are fit enough. You have enough fast twitch muscle fibers that if you trip on something, you could catch yourself from a fall. Versus somebody who's maybe got better bone density than she does, is in the osteopenic range, so not quite bad enough to be osteoporosis, but sits around and doesn't do anything, doesn't have enough muscle mass, doesn't have the ability to catch themselves if they trip on a rug. That person needs a much more aggressive intervention than the person who's fit and active, but this bone density scan reading is low. Because what's the actual outcome we're treating is preventing fractures, right?
All right.
So yes, having enough bone density does that, but if the person never falls, well, how are they going to break a bone? It's possible, obviously, car accidents and all that kind of a thing, but it's much you're in a much better situation if you're fit, basically.
Oh, nice. So, and just to summarize that is just that he was saying that plant-based with emphasis on protein, it's important because of sarcopenia. And I think, I read this interesting fact, and it might not be true, you know better than I do. It was that at the age of 35, at the age of 35, right, we lose 1% of our muscle mass just naturally. A year, yeah. Okay, so it was right.
So 1% of muscle mass, it's 2 to 3 times higher than that. Let's see, fast twitch fibers, and then it's 3 times higher than that. So it's up to 9% a year for power, for muscle power, right? Which is resistance, but at a speed.
Okay.
And that's really what you need. Speaking of falls, that's really what you need in order to
survive.
To prevent yourself from falling and getting injured in those kinds of situations, is you need not just the strength, but you need to be able to do that quickly.
Okay.
to catch yourself to react to things.
Oh.
So yeah, very, very important. It may not be, I don't remember if it's 35, because you still can add muscle mass. It may be older. I don't remember exactly, but that statistic of 1% a year is 100% spot on.
Yeah, and I think your wife was telling me that 35 is the age of geriatrics in medicine, right?
Geriatric pregnancies?
Oh, okay. Is that what it is? There you go.
Yeah, because she was a geriatric pregnancy with her second
mine.
one. Yeah, the cutoff is 60 or 65 usually for geriatrics and
Okay.
in medicine, yeah.
All
Unless you're an OBGYN.
And so what age would you say is that I don't like to say risk, but it is the highest priority to focus on that muscle mass?
Probably most important. Oh gosh, I don't think there's ever a time it's not important, to be honest with you.
That's a good answer.
Because when you're older, the more you focus on that, like over the age of 65, for instance, the more you focus on that, the more likely you're going to be able to pick up your grandkids, get up off the floor, prevent yourself from a fall. There's a lot of functional stuff, right? That's activities of daily living. If you have adequate muscle mass, that you would struggle with inadequate muscle mass. But like you alluded to, is we're losing muscle mass anyways. So still very important to do it at the younger age, primarily because muscles are the only cells that are multinucleated.
Okay.
So it's like a bunch of cells come together and make one big cell. And the genetic information gets like replicated and it kind of sparses out along the length of the muscle. And the more nuclei that you have, the bigger the muscle can get.
All right.
And that happens primarily at a young age.
Okay.
Like puberty, especially testosterone is one of the things that stimulates the creation of multiple more nuclei. But so when you're 20 years old, if you get to the point where you can, bench 250 and you can squat 500, then when you're 65, even if you haven't kept up with that, you have more nuclei in those muscles. Those nuclei don't go away.
Really?
So you have a greater ability of getting back to a greater strength.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's
so actually extremely important for everyone that's not gone through puberty.
Okay.
That would be the right answer.
And so everyone who's not gone
so the
through
cutoff
puberty.
is puberty.
Okay, there you go. Then you should be focusing on building muscle mass at that moment. Speaking of that, well, I'm someone who's approaching 40. And I have a lot of friends who are also approaching 40. So I'm going to use this interview in order to give them some information as well. And you said testosterone, right? Yeah. So there's an age that I can't remember where it starts plummeting faster. And because you're a functional medicine doctor, and I asked you earlier, I know the answer, but do you prefer, what is the best way to naturally increase your testosterone production?
Simplest thing is lower extremity muscle, like strengthening exercises. That's the simplest thing. Yeah. So squats and lunges, your body responds with testosterone because that is an anabolic hormone, right? It's stimulating the growth of things. So if you are giving your body a stimulus to grow, which it's not growing height-wise. So if you're not doing it fat-wise either, if you're stimulating strength, basically, you will cause your body to create more testosterone by doing that. And the biggest bang for your buck is the biggest muscle groups, which are your quads and your hamstrings.
Okay. So
that's the simplest thing that you could do.
And then so at 40, and in that ballpark, there's a ton of internal issues because a lot of men, we have superficial issues of where we want to look like we were in our 20s. But I'm someone who tries to get people to encourage on what's going on inside. You were saying, the microbiomes and things like that. So my question is, do you recommend, at your practice, blood work? How does that happen? Do you do that?
Yeah. We order lots of blood work, and it kind of just depends on the individual patient. and what specifically we're looking at. So again, very driven by that person, what symptoms, if it's like, say, for instance, it's a screening test.
Okay.
The most important things to look at, and this is, some of this stuff would be checked by a traditional doctor, would be like liver and kidney function, blood counts. So that's looking for like anemia, but also looking like your white blood cells, and then cholesterol and like a diabetes screening test.
Okay.
So those are kind of like the 5 basic pillars that any insurance company would reimburse a doctor or a lab for running for a preventive exam. If patients have like maybe cholesterol problems, or if patients have thyroid problems, or, just depending on the individual situation, there's a lot more specific stuff that I would order.
Okay.
So for instance, I've got a patient who I've known for 5 years or so, carried over from my previous practice. He has high cholesterol, and he has since I've known him. We've been able to do some different things in order to get it down. But instead of going through just LabCorp requests for his traditional like cholesterol testing, I said, this year I think we should get a really good in-depth look. And the best place is Boston Heart. Boston Heart Lab, by far and away the best in terms of cholesterol testing and cardiovascular risk profiles.
Okay.
So we ordered stuff from that through them. So he went to a third-party laboratory, like in Melbourne area. It's called Any Lab Test now. Right. They're over in West Melbourne.
Okay. Yeah.
You can get your
right by my house, actually.
Yeah. They'll draw just about anything. You just have to, like, for Boston Heart Lab, they literally ship a kit to the patient.
Okay.
And the patient literally brings that in and they do it. Boston Heart now actually has a finger prick for some cholesterol numbers. It's not as precise as doing the blood draw, but most of them are 97 to 100% accurate compared to like a blood draw. But again, if somebody has symptoms, then just depending on what their symptoms are, I may order a nutritional evaluation through a company called Genova.
Okay.
Right? I may do a set of hormone testing through a company called Precision Analytical. They're out in Oregon, and it's actually all urine. So so they don't do any blood work specifically with that. They do one other test that's saliva also.
Nice.
But yeah, so it really just depends on the individual and what we're ordering. If they feel like they want to run it through their insurance, then most of the time it's going to be like Quest or LabCorp.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you said something, my eyes lit up when you said it. I was curious about the urine testing.
Yeah.
Like, so would that be like based on like the liver and the kidney being the filter of it?
So the gold standard of measuring total hormones is a 24-hour urine collection.
Okay.
Yeah. So the metabolites of it filter out, and small amounts of it do filter out through the kidneys. So what this company does is they give you 5 different cards that you pee on, and so you're not collecting all of your urine, because the 24-hour urine collection can be a little cumbersome.
Yeah.
But having these little cards that you pee on a couple of specific times throughout the day, and they choose these times on purpose because it correlates basically 99% to a 24-hour urine collection. So you basically get the exact same results, but with 5 separate random times basically throughout the day.
Okay.
Which is really nice. So much easier for patients to do. I just did this myself. I'm waiting on the labs to come back right now, but
nice.
But yeah, so it's much easier to do. And that's actually the really cool thing about functional medicine testing is there's certainly some things that need to be done through blood, but there's a lot that can be done through saliva, through urine, through stool with like microbiome testing. Yeah. And a lot of that stuff you can just do at home on your own. So like you literally get a kit shipped to your house and you don't have to go to the lab. You don't have to get your blood drawn, and poked and everything like that. And you can get sometimes even more in-depth, like much more in-depth information.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. So you said liver, like when it comes to getting labs.
Yeah. So
40,
right. Just
to touch base where we were at.
Yeah.
Is that liver, kidney, you said hormone, right?
Not typically blood counts.
Okay.
Cholesterol, and then diabetes screening.
Okay.
Those would be kind of basic things that like any 40-year-old should be getting checked at a bare minimum.
Okay.
as a functional doctor, I highly recommend also doing thyroid testing and at least a vitamin D also.
Okay.
Because most people are deficient in vitamin D. Even if you spend a ton of time outside, it's just hard to get enough vitamin D. But yeah, so those would be things but sometimes that's not covered. That was another reason why I was like, I just can't work in insurance or with insurance anymore.
Yeah.
Because I would have patients who would get a vitamin D level with their annual physical.
Yeah.
Because I think that's preventive. And it is preventive. Clearly, people with a normal vitamin D level have a 30% lower chance of having colon cancer.
Okay.
As well as lower chances of having osteoporosis, boosts your immune system. There's all those other effects. Solid research on lower colon cancer.
There's a lot of studies about vitamin D and your circadian rhythm.
And circadian rhythms. Yeah. Comes from the sun.
Yeah.
Makes sense that it should be tied to circadian rhythms.
If someone has sleep issues and things like that, that should be
very important.
Yeah. So you were mentioning that not many people get enough vitamin D, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's not too many foods that are rich in it. So
mushrooms and egg yolks. Yeah. Some fish, I guess.
Yeah. And so would you recommend supplements?
I tell a lot of patients that vitamin D is kind of the only supplement that I pretty much tell every patient they should be on.
Yeah.
There's very few things that everybody needs, but that's probably the most important one from my standpoint. Is I think everybody needs to be on vitamin D, because also a normal level of vitamin D in general not adequate to really be functional in your system. So it protects you against the lowest hanging fruit of disease. Yeah, no worries. Got to answer that.
No, she was checking to see if I was okay.
Oh, okay. Good. No, I haven't killed you yet.
Right.
You're going to be exhausted by the end.
He's functionally fixing relationships.
Yeah. So yeah, vitamin D, again, there's only been one patient that I've ever had that I said, you don't need to be on vitamin D, because I told him his vitamin D level was low. And he said, well, I run outside 4 days a week. Should I just take my shirt off? And I said, yes. And he came back the next year and it had doubled.
Wow.
So he went from low of 20 up to mid 40s.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, you don't need to be on vitamin D. I'd love for you to be up at 60. That'd be better. But I was like, if you don't want to take something every day, get it. You're doing pretty good.
The holistic way of vitamin D requires sunscreen, by the way.
No.
Oh, there we go.
It does not.
All right.
The sunscreen blocks 98% of the rays that actually convert the precursor in your skin.
Oh,
so
wow.
What you need, supplements, vitamin D supplements come in 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, something like that. The amount of sun it takes to cover an adult or your body wearing just a swimsuit. Yeah. So no shirt, no shoes or anything like that. That would get your skin color to turn a slightly darker shade. So for me, it would be a slight pink coloration.
Okay.
Right? The next day, if you could still see that slight change in color, that gets you about 25,000 units of vitamin D. Sticks around in the bloodstream since the fat-soluble vitamin for about 2 weeks. So you would need to do that about once every 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So you could do it that
way. All right. So
you'd have to sit outside a lot longer than that.
Because I have the natural tan, the melanin. Now, I just thought about something when I was asking you these questions. There's two guys here talking, but he also services women as well. So I want to ask him your thoughts. I can't ask too many questions personally because, but
experience.
I don't have the experience. But what do you recommend for women, as far as when it comes to when they're starting aging, maybe with energy levels? What kind of test should they look for? Similar to the guys? Or
yeah, the basic stuff is definitely similar. Thyroid problems, though, affect women a lot more commonly than men. So thyroid would definitely be something to be checking. Your typical doctor at best is going to check a TSH and a free T4. So TSH comes from your brain, tells your thyroid to produce T4.
Okay.
T4 floats through the bloodstream, attaches to your muscle, your bone, the lining of your blood vessel, whatever cell. And then when that cell absorbs it, it turns it into T3. T3 is the active form. Of thyroid. You still get a tiny bit of T3 that floats around in the bloodstream. So from a functional medicine perspective, it's important to know how much of T3 is actually there, because that gives you a general idea of how good is this person at turning T4 into T3, because that's when it's actually functioning in the cell. So from a functional perspective, we do a TSH, a free T4, a free T3. I would also do a total T3. So total just means how much is attached to protein, as well as how much is just floating around naturally in the bloodstream. And then there's another thing called reverse T3. Reverse T3 is like T4 can either go to T3 or reverse. And reverse doesn't have the same beneficial effects of the T3, but it attaches to the receptor. So it just blocks the T3 from working.
Really?
So to get a full picture of your thyroid, you really need all of those things. And then if you are actively having symptoms, it's worth also doing antibody testing to see, is your immune system attacking your thyroid gland? Because that leads us down a whole separate pathway of autoimmunity, which is the main cause of hypothyroid, but it's not supposed to happen. Right?
Yeah.
And it hasn't always been this way. It hasn't always been that I want to say it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women have thyroid issues, 1 in 10 men have thyroid issues, and the vast majority of both are autoimmune.
Okay.
There's something in our environment that is making us attack our own bodies. And it's not supposed to be that way.
Yeah.
So if you can take those things out, which primarily is foods, you often can reverse thyroid issues and not be on a medication.
I have my own speculations on what that may be. It's the food.
Yeah.
It's because there's got to be one common denominator that causes it, and we're all consuming the same thing.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I still want to ask more questions about the women.
Yeah.
And then it's just fatigue is one of the things. And you said that, would that be something related to your thyroid?
Definitely can be. Almost innumerable causes. Definitely could be hormonal. Primarily, I think of like adrenal glands and your like fight or flight response. So people have probably heard the term, or maybe they haven't, but of adrenal fatigue. It's the general concept that your adrenaline gland or the adrenal gland is overworked. It's kind of the same idea with diabetes. Your pancreas and the insulin producing cells get overworked. So they just get tired out and they stop doing what they're supposed to do. So the adrenaline gland the same thing can happen. And then you just can't respond the way you're supposed to waking up in the morning, because that's a natural spike in cortisol or the adrenal function, adrenaline production, but just also everyday things, getting sick. You need cortisol. You need that adrenal function in order to fight illnesses. So you could have just like mild fatigue, and it could be an adrenal problem. It could be a thyroid problem. So those are both, I guess, technically hormonal. A lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies can do that.
Okay.
Primarily because they are cofactors in our energy production pathways. The breakdown of sugar or fat is a incredibly complex and coordinated system that ends in the mitochondria, right? Which is this like almost like bacteria that basically lives, like coexists with us. And then you get the electron transport chain. So there's so many different steps in the breakdown of the fat or the sugar that need tons of different like B vitamins. And then in the mitochondria, again, there's tons of different proteins and electrolytes, magnesium and zinc and selenium and all these different things. So if you're missing some of those things, you're not going to be able to function as well as you should. You're going to feel fatigue, but there's so many different actual, again, root causes that could be what you need to, and what you need to address.
Okay, so could that be cured through diet? Well, everything
depends.
Most things could.
Most things can.
Is it possible to get cortisol in from your diet?
You certainly could if you ate like a pig or cow adrenal gland.
Oh, you could. Okay. So.
But here's the problem, and this is a problem with the entire endocrine system primarily. So the entire hormonal system is that when you start taking something exogenously, meaning from outside your body and putting it into your body that is a hormone, your natural production slows down and maybe turns off.
Okay.
So I was kind of going that direction when we were talking about thyroid is if you can supplement, you prevent them from being on a medication for the rest of their life.
Really?
Because if you go on thyroid, it is very, very rare that somebody can come back off of it. Most commonly, somebody that can come back off of it would be like a postpartum mom that has hypothyroidism and then it comes back to normal function. That's like the most common time that we see it.
Yeah.
But most people that get started on the thyroid medicine never come off of it because the thyroid that produces that T4 and T3 we were talking about earlier, it's got receptors for T3 and T4. So it self-regulates some. So when it produces a bunch, that T3 and T4 comes back to the thyroid gland and says, you've got enough. Hey, you've produced enough. So the thyroid gland has just a certain amount of sensitivity to what it's already producing. Your adrenal gland is the same, right? Mm-hmm. So the most common side effect of somebody taking testosterone injections is that their testes shrink because that's where most of the testosterone is made. Yeah. And then if you stop their testosterone injections, their testosterone levels just tank and they never come back up.
Really?
There are certain things you can try to do to get it to re-stimulate, and sometimes it will start back up, but that person goes through hell for probably a couple of months before their natural testosterone starts coming back up.
Really?
Because of this like feedback mechanism that's built into the hormone system.
Oh.
So that is one of the reasons why, like going back to one of your first questions about the type of diet, why I really love whole food treatments and whole plant treatments is that they're more likely to not affect the system in that way where they're actually shutting something off. We've got a lot of like small proteins called peptides, right? You've probably heard of that.
And collagen, right?
Yeah, and collagen. So there's a lot of different things that we're starting to see now, like, oh, this has a beneficial stimulatory effect on testosterone, or a stimulatory effect is that you can inject, but we don't know yet that if you're on that long term, especially like a really consistent dose, so physiology is not consistent, right? It fluctuates. So if you're on a really consistent dose, we don't know if long-term is that going to actually shut down your natural production. Because if it does, then you become dependent on whatever you've started injecting yourself with. And the same thing can happen with if you were like eating just pork thyroid, for instance. That's one of the thyroid medications. Is literally they take the thyroid out of a pig, a dead pig, and they grind it up. They try to get it to the right levels of T4 and T3, and they put it in a pill and you take it.
Really?
And a lot of people actually do a lot better on those than the one that's synthetic because it's whole.
Yeah.
But again, if we can do something that stimulates your own thyroid production or stops your immune system we can save you from having to take that. Because again, if you start taking it, you're pretty much committed. If it's in the hormone system, you're almost guaranteed, not guaranteed, I shouldn't say that, but you're pretty much on that for life.
All right. So I have a question because you gave me a great segue to it just now. Speaking of the immune system, just coming off the tail end of a pandemic, which kind of I still think we're in because viruses go nowhere. But what are your top things? I don't even want to put a number on it. That can help strengthen your immune system. What do you recommend that somebody should do?
Vitamin D, definitely number one. Zinc would be number two. Zinc is really important for fighting any infection. Doesn't matter if it's a parasite or a virus or a bacteria. Our immune cells use it to literally suck up that foreign thing inside of them and breaking it apart. So it's called a zinc zipper. So zinc is super, super important. So especially when you are sick, that is something that's going to be super, super beneficial. And then antioxidants. And you can get that
from Whole Foods.
Blueberries. Phytonutrient spectrum, exactly.
The mixed berries, right? Like all the polyphenols, right?
Polyphenols.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Raspberries, blackberries, blueberries.
mulberries if you're in Florida.
Yeah. And then what's the one that's really popular? Elderberry, right?
Elderberry,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and that has some other stimulatory effects on the immune system. So but that's definitely another really good thing to be taken. Honey is also really beneficial.
Yeah. Local, right?
Yeah, especially local. Yeah, definitely.
That's like my thing.
Yeah.
I was telling him earlier that I was like, before I would ever buy a Lambo or a Bugatti or anything,
whatever it is, yeah,
I would like that all of my food locally sourced, organic, and as close to being untouched by anyone other than the person who sourced it as possible. And that's a lot more complicated than you think.
Yeah. I'm the exact same way. Before I would buy any of that stuff, I would be growing all my own food.
Yes.
I would be the one doing the harvesting.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. That is priority number one. Yeah.
So we both have families, and I know one of the most common things I see on the interwebs out there is that children are finicky in particular to eat, and like on eating. And food is, so this is mostly, I'm picking his brain on, as a functional medicine doctor, what does he give his kids to eat?
Yeah.
And we both know it's still challenging no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what.
And it's mostly like, the question that I have is, what do you try to give your own children to get them to eat? What are some ways that you can get them to creatively try new things? Because that's the hardest part.
Right.
Is like textures is really big with kids.
Yep.
And just mostly no one's really successful at it, just so you know.
Yeah, exactly. You take every W you can get.
Yeah.
You take every win you can get.
But what do you recommend? Like, because there's a lot, like, the proper nutrition is hard as adults. And we can eat things like, I have this thing that, like, ashwagandha, like when I tell you that I take it, it tastes just like dirt.
Yeah.
Like, there is no, like, I'm only eating it for the pure results of what I know that it gives
exactly,
to me.
The benefits.
Yeah, and it's like, I say it's like when people shoot tequila.
Yeah.
It's like no one really likes the taste of it.
Right.
It's the result of the alcohol.
Yeah.
So when it comes to kids, like, they don't get the proper nutrition and food because they don't eat everything. So how do you recommend trying to give that to children?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts actually in pregnancy. I think what the mom does, there's a lot of imprinting on that baby that's going to be born. And I mean, a lot of moms will see that and experience, like, I had these crazy cravings of such and such, and their kid will either like love that food or hate that food. So I think that's a big start, is when you're pregnant, when you're a woman and you're pregnant, eating really well and eating a variety of foods definitely makes a really big difference. Same thing with kids when they're starting to eat, whether it's at 4, 5, 6 months, however old it is that you're starting them with whole foods like avocado, baked sweet potato, apples that are like ground up. Those were the first things that we fed our kids.
Okay.
Applesauce was number one, because we wanted to make sure it was sweet, because we knew that breast milk was, something sweet. That's very palatable and sweet for him. And then we did, I think, avocado second, and then sweet potato was third, and we kind of just like slowly like worked our way up.
Sure.
Avocado is great because super fatty, right? The biggest thing that's developing in little kids is their brain, and that's like 90% fat. So they need really good fats. So that's a really great place to start. But when you're doing it early on, I think you end up getting a lot of benefits down the road with less picky eaters. If you've already got a picky eater, it's really about investigating with them, like, what things they don't like. So understanding, is it a texture thing?
Yeah.
Because if it's a soft texture, then they're never going to eat like mashed beans or mashed potatoes, right? If they don't like that texture. But you could still give them sliced potatoes that are baked in the oven because they might be a little bit crispier. You could give them sprouted beans or more of like a firm bean, and it still gives them the beneficial nutrition, but it has a different consistency to it, if that makes sense. Like think of we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Think of like hummus versus a chickpea,
Okay.
right? Hummus is like a really soft, like just depending on how much sauce, other things you put in it, it can be like a really smooth texture. Whereas a chickpea, if you sprout it, is going to be super crunchy.
Okay.
So that's a way that you could troubleshoot if you understand what is it. If it's a flavor, then obviously you're going to have to be working on flavors. For instance, a lot of kids don't like the flavor of broccoli, but they like the flavor of butter.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with putting butter on broccoli to get them to eat it. Right? I think from my standpoint,
butter, right?
Yeah, grass-fed butter, ghee,
Yep.
or if they like coconut oil,
All right.
something like that. But things that make it more palatable. My son went through a phase. My 4-year-old went through a phase where he just like loved salt.
Yeah.
So I would make things for him, and he would be like, "No, I don't want that." And then I would say, "Okay, well, here's a little bit of salt, and you can put salt on it."
My son did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
In homeopathy, it's really interesting. In homeopathy, that means they're grieving.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So it started for my son after we moved across the country.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap this up because the battery looks like
Yeah,
it's about to go. Yeah. So I want to make sure it saves it.
Oh,
Yeah. So anyway, this is Dr. Lon. This was just a little taste of our podcast. We're going to have many more podcasts. Just let me know any questions that you may have for him, and then we'll forward to you. You can find him
at RootMD. We're at 105 South Riverside Drive, suite number 110 in Indialantic. And you can give me a call anytime. We'd love to hear from you.
And he's having a grand opening?
Yeah, grand opening, open house kind of things for people to come in and take a look at how we're doing things different on April 22nd. It's a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There will also be an ice cream truck outside. You brought up ice cream earlier.
I love ice cream.
But people will get to do like grip strength, which is the way that we measure upper body strength in the clinic for determining if somebody has like risk of sarcopenia. You'll be able to see the STIQ scanner. We use a point of care ultrasound in clinic just about every single day on most patients. So people will be able to see like, oh, cool, I can like see the scan up on the screen when I'm sitting on the exam table and everything. So come take a look around.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
Pleasure.
Yeah, this was fun, man.
Yeah.
We got to do it. And we're going to spice it up for you guys. He just opened this practice, so we might have some nice stuff up here. We're going to get some plants in here. And then
this planter.
Yeah, this was actually the first face-to-face interview on the Change for Good podcast, guys. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And be sure to come and check out RootMD with Dr. Long.
Cool.
You guys have a good one.
You got to do more of the face-to-face.
I know.
Because there's